Welcome to Future People, conversations with the change makers, impact makers, and the future shapers. Future People is a bold, future-focused podcast hosted by myself, Dan Moussa, founder of Thirdway Advisory. Join me for unfiltered conversations with the leaders who are rethinking value, legacy, and indeed their own leadership in a world that's being rebuilt, from our cities to our climate and our culture. These conversations are not to be missed. Welcome back to Future People. Today I'm joined by Neil Tunnah, former professional rugby coach turned leadership advisor. Neil's a founder of Performance Chain, where he helps organisations live trust, clarity and consistency at the highest level. Neil draws on his background in elite sport and his work with boards and executive teams. He brings a practical lens to how leaders build systems that drive performance, adapt to disruption and create cultures where people can thrive. But beyond that, Neil's a very good friend of mine. We played rugby. Did we play rugby together? Or we crossed paths certainly at the same club back in Scotland, mate. So it's great to have you on board. And mate, really, really excited about this episode and what we're going to get into.
Mate, I love the intro and the bio. You make me sound way more interested and exciting than I actually am. But I'm really looking forward to catching up today. We've had some awesome chats in the last couple of weeks, and it'll be really nice to get some of it down here and share with some of your listeners.
Mate, I think just to set the scene, and one of the things I'm excited about exploring, right, is so often in business and organisations, right, we hear about taking examples from elite sport and sport based, where it be culture, behaviours, feedback. We'll dive into that, but mate, before we get into it, just give us like a quick introduction, mate, to yourself, like your journey from being a joiner in Jedburgh to advising boards and leaders.
You gave me PTSD when you said that, for being a joiner in Jedburgh. It's interesting, mate, because when I look back, it's an interesting start point, because I had a brilliant upbringing. I was really, really lucky to grow up in a little town like Jedburgh. I was really tight with my mates. Then I sort of left school, and everyone was leaving school at the time, and I ended up almost falling into it. I left school sort of halfway through fifth year and fell into carpentry because all my mates were out earning money and they were having a great time, and I was still at school with no money. And I kind of left school, picked up a carpentry apprenticeship, and jumped on that wagon kind of because my mates were. And I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy being a chippy, but it taught me so much. I didn't even know it was teaching me at the time. So I look back and I am grateful for that time of what it taught me. But then kind of went on a bit of an interesting journey. Moved to Edinburgh, became sort of embedded in that Edinburgh community, rugby community, and then picked a couple of really good jobs in construction management there. And the reason for sharing them, there's huge amounts of learning and how not to, lead and manage people, clients, everything. As someone in the mid-20s, I didn't have a Scooby-Doo what I was doing, to be quite honest with you, mate. I was pretty much making it up as I went along. But there's some good people there that gave me opportunity, and it helped me sort of learn. And GFC, mate, we were at Watsonians, I think 9 and 10, we crossed over, or maybe 8 and 9, early. So that, I guess late in 2009, I made a decision I wanted to come to Australia, mate. I was 30 at the time. I was turning 30. I wanted to come and have a look around. You can get a work and holiday visa up till that point, which makes it easy. So I did. I booked a one-way ticket. I went home. Interesting, mate. I was working for an interior fit-out business in Edinburgh, mate, and what happened was the CFO had embezzled £1 million out of the business, and I walked in one day. And the administrators were in. They said, "Right, you don't have jobs anymore." As the administrator was speaking in not the early days, but I had a laptop and I jumped on and booked a one-way ticket to Australia. It was almost like, right, this is the time. If I don't take it, it'll never happen. And I needed to get out of Edinburgh as well, mate. I needed to get out and sort of work out who the hell I was at 30 years old. I didn't have a clue. Came to Australia, mate, and it's taught me so much and given me so much as well in terms of family, but opportunity as well. If I hadn't come to Australia, I'd question whether I'd even have still been involved in rugby. Just because I think my life would have gone a different direction. So I got to Sydney and it presented me all this opportunity to be around people who were, I guess, rugby coaches and rugby players who were really aspirational. I fell into a second grade head coach role at Gordon, just by chance, because all the Highlanders, mate, all the first grade coaches literally walked out. 2 weeks from the season, and a guy called Jason Greer, who's a great human being, mate, he's based in Sydney. He said, I'm going to take first grade. Will you? And the guy called Mark Philp, will you do head coach of second grade? At that point, I'd been appointed as, I think I was assistant to second grade coach or something like that. And I'm like, I've been here for 4 weeks coaching, and again, I'm making it up as I go, the coaching. I'm just seeing things and talking to players about it. But Jason's gone, I've been watching you coaching, and I want you to come in, and Mark agrees we want you to be head coach of second grade for the season. And I was like, all right. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'll give it a go. And luckily had an outstanding group of players, mate, for about, I think, 2 seasons. So the reason I'm telling that story is I learned so much from the playing group at that point around, what other people needed, but also started to recognize what my life's in construction, whether it be chippy or construction management, taught me a whole lot of skills that were transferable at that moment in time. I'm not saying I transferred them well, but what it did was start to shine a light on what could be transferred. And I started to play around with it.
When you're on a construction site, right, it's that piece of so many different characters, right? From your guys walking around in your suits, you put a hard hat on once a month, to your blokes who are on there every day in the mud, and it gives you that spectrum of personalities, doesn't it?
I'll tell you a funny story. And when I got to Australia, I was still in construction, and I picked up a job through the first club that I came across, who was a club called Knox Boys, and I was meant to play for them, but I ended up coaching a little bit of the Colts team. But met this guy through that, a guy called Doug Westaway, who gave me a job, and he gave me a job as a site manager. He was building houses, like top end, high spec houses on the North Shore of Sydney, and it was awesome because I'm looking at houses. At that point in time, like I'd seen nice houses in Scotland, but these things were, I'm talking houses that were worth 45, 50, 65 million dollars now. And we're building these things. And I pulled up on the site one day, and I'm the site manager. And again, I reckon I'm 4 weeks into the country at this point. And the chippy reverses his ute onto the site. And then the brickie comes and sets up his brick saw, spraying brick dust against this new ute. And Chippy had gone inside, he's missing it, and all I hear is this big commotion. I'm like, what is happening here? And I looked out the site office window, and all I see is the Chippy horizontally tackling the brickie while the brick saws. And I'm like, this is Australia. This is unbelievable. Nothing prepared me for this.
Now, that's a good reference to Knox Old Boys, because my first job in Australia was from a guy called Mark Bayliss, who I don't know if you came across, but at Knox. But I
reckon I know Mark.
Playing subbies rugby at St. Pat's. But mate, how did you so you're coaching second grade, and there'll be so many people involved in amateur sport who want to make the jump to professional sport. Like, just quickly take us through that journey. How did you navigate that? Was it an element of chance? Was it you make your own luck? Did you find opportunities? Like, how did you traverse from the amateur into the professional?
Well, I got sick of construction, number one, and I walked away from it. I was working for a commercial builder in the North Shore, and I just got sick of fighting with people about contracting money in Australia, and I just wasn't enjoying it. So I phoned the missus one day and said, I'm finished here. We just had our first gate, and she goes, what do you mean you're finished? I mean, you know yourself, project managers in construction in Australia, you get really well paid. And she's like, what are you going to do? I was like, I'm going to coach rugby. She said, have you got a job? I said, nah. but I'm going to coach rugby, and it's fair play hard. She's gone, right, I'll back you. So I picked up the phone to, you remember Ewan Clark?
Yeah.
Clark,
well, he was at Knox Grammar, wasn't he?
He was. So he was at Knox Grammar. So I called Clarky, and he put me in touch with Matt Williams, and Matt said, come on and have a coffee. So I went and sat with him, mate, and had a coffee, and he said, listen, I'll give you 10 hours a week. Go on in and coach. So that was enough at that point for me to go, right, I can walk away from construction. I've got some rugby. I'm doing second grade shoot shield, I think, at that point. I was doing second grade. I've gone, right, I'm just going to immerse myself in coaching. I'm going to reshape everything. A massive pay cut. I'm going to immerse myself in coaching, and I'm just going to see if I can push my way through and see what happens here. So I spent about 3 weeks in the program, and Matt came and said, hey, listen, we'll give you sort of 30, 35 hours a week, which was brilliant for me, because that then, while it wasn't the construction money, I could see, right, well, if I do this for 2 years and I can plot a path through the shoot shield You weren't making great money in the shield at that point in time, but again, it's another top up. But
Yeah.
learning to do what I love doing, and that's where it really took off for me, mate. Just and purely because I was coaching so much. Just the learning was phenomenal around not just the technical and tactical, but how do you connect with people off field? How do you support the individual effectively? Again, a lot of it from getting it wrong, but a lot of it from getting it, exposed to it by people who had a lot of experience in that space. And it was literally boots on ground as much as I possibly could have done, and that helped massively. I got the opportunity to go first grade in 2014 with Simon Cron at North Sydney, which was brilliant. And then off the back of that, I am the head coach at West Harbour, but also coaching in the NRC with Jimmy Williams. Got a great relationship with Jimmy. Really, just he trusted me, and that's like you come back to how important is trust in teams. For me, it is absolutely everything. If you don't have it, you can't effectively enable everything else.
Yeah.
I genuinely believe that every interaction you have as a human being with another human being, you're either building it or eroding it. So that was a real
I
driver
love that.
for
I've never
me.
heard that before. It's brilliant. You're either building it or eroding it. And do you know what? And yeah, you're absolutely right. You don't think about it, do you? But subconsciously, that's part. Yeah, very, very true, and it's an impactful statement.
We're always scanning. I think as human beings, we're always scanning, mate. Whether it's conscious or subconscious, we're all scanning the people that we're interacting with and looking for reasons to, or looking for reasons not to.
Nice, mate. And so, like from Australia, I'm right in saying you went back to Jersey, coached the Jersey Reds successfully. For those who don't know, obviously the Jersey Reds suffered financial problems as did a number of rugby clubs in the UK at the time, and unfortunately tumbled down the tiers of English rugby, as it were. And it was so from there, mate. Talk us about how you quickly just what drove you to establish a performance chain.
Yeah, well, mate, it was actually born. The idea for it was born in Jersey through learning. It's just as simple as that. And it was through learning. It was learning around the way I was interacting with people. Some of the complexities that I created in the early days of Jersey were an enormously steep learning curve for me, because I was working across 3 or 4 programs in Australia. I was a full-time coach, but I've gone into a full-time environment at Jersey where, you're literally applying yourself in the same place every day. So I'm not bouncing between knocks. At that point, it was Manly, and then anything after you get my hands on. I'm into Jersey. I roll the sleeves up. It's in season. It's 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Like, you live and breathe it. And what I learned really quickly was ultimately you're still dealing with people. So I went in where they said, I've got to be A, B, and C. I've got to be more technical than I've ever been. I've got to be more tactical than I've ever been. They need to hear this and hear that from me. And what I worked out pretty quickly was, we've got to remove the complexity. We've got to make it understandable. And then we've got to bring them in and give them lots and lots of ownership if we want them to be able to perform. You know yourself. Some of these blokes, some of them are 130 kilos and they're running at, they're running 40 seconds in almost even time. Right? The velocity. Yeah. So if you think about the velocity and the impacts in the game that then impact things like decision making, your decision making around what am I doing now, what am I doing next, what I need to do tactically, you've got to make it simple. So it can be a big plan in a coach's office that looks complex, but by the time it gets to the players, it needs to be simple, understandable, and executable, which means it's got to be really, really clear. And the best way to create clarity is to simplify that plan in a language and shapes and ideas that they can digest quickly and just get on with executing.
So I think in that in the last few minutes here, every single piece you've touched on there is fully relatable to being a leader in an organization or how you structure an organization. So. I think you're going to answer this one the way I think you're going to answer it. But what's one habit from professional rugby that most leaders resist? But if it took it on board, it would change your own team, probably if inside a 90-day period, for example.
Yeah, it's a great question, because I've got a lot of things that jump to mind. So right now I'm scanning in my head for the critical few. What's the one thing that I think like I see consistently? I think if we can if we can create environments where leaders are willing to relinquish control and devolve decision-making power around the things that they can do that with. Now, don't get me wrong, like from a like we live in a hierarchical society, Dan. So there's natural decision makings that sit with the CEOs that ICs at the front line of a sales team have to make different decisions. That's the way it is. But I think there are things in our businesses that we can look at and go, right, how can I empower my people better? And what do I have to do front end to give me the confidence to be able to empower them better? So that's where I talk about things like trust, but then we look at skill-based competency, character. It's a willingness to create an environment where if people make a mistake, everyone gets up the next day and the sun still comes up. Mistakes happen. So we want to limit them in terms of high impact financial mistakes in business. But I think we should still be looking at, right, how can I allow them the freedom to make mistakes and learn? Sorry, mate, you go. I could talk over.
No, that's fair. I mean, cut off. But I think, so I agree with that, right? And that you see so many organizations where like the leadership's a bottleneck, right? Because they're not willing to empower or relinquish decision makers, right? And again, you think back to any sort of professional environment, football, rugby, basketball, name the sport, it was generally a captain, right? But as a leadership group who are making, and that's why sports people are so good, right? They make key decisions in the heat of the moment around pretty critical areas. One really cool thing we discussed the other day when we were having a chat was about feedback, right? Yeah. And you take your time in professional sport in a weekly period from back in a Monday for reviews to your next match on a Saturday, the level of feedback's through the roof, right? And we actually spoke about how sports people are actually really, really good at taking feedback because they get so much of it. And feedback can be bad, it can be critical, but it's a constant feedback loop. Whereas within an organization, people don't get feedback sometimes ever, or if you're lucky, you might get a performance review once a year and you're ticking 5 questions, and that's about as much feedback as you can get. And I'll hand over to you because I think you gave a beautiful example of writing sort of 30, 90, 60 or 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 1 year in a board and filling in the gap. So maybe I think it'd be cool just to open that feedback piece and the importance of it.
And I think it's a great discussion because we see it as a performance accelerator in business. And so what does that mean? It means that we have to develop the habits and the confidence to do it more often. The challenge is how do we frame it in a way that it gets received well? Because feedback is a two-way street. It's not just me walking in and giving feedback. That's one side of it. But the way that I give it will have a huge impact on how it's received or not received. So how do you frame that front end? And we went through a process earlier in the week with a business here in Adelaide where they want to establish a culture of feedback because they recognize and see the benefits. And they've got system and process from HR in place right now that are really, really good. So they have consistency. So we work with some businesses that might have feedback once a year. This business in Adelaide do it 4 times a year. So they'll go month 1, set the scene, month 3, 6, 9, and then wrap up at the end of the year. So what we got them to do was, right, what's the point in having a culture of feedback? What do we want it to achieve? So let's get really clear on what we want it to achieve. And then we can start to shape how we give it and how we receive it. So they spoke about, well, ultimately it has to be about growth. So it's, as a leader, feedback is about helping people get better. And don't get me wrong, mate, I've worked in some environments where feedback is about getting shit off your chest. And it's some coaches that are just like, I've just got to tell them. And this is where we open the can of worms around. And I feel really passionate about this stuff, mate, because when I hear that brutal honesty is necessary in high performance environments, it makes me want to gag. Like I feel so deeply like brutal honesty, that language is a place for unskillful leaders and coaches to hide in the shadows and hide behind poorly delivered feedback. So I agree, honesty needs to be in place in your business, but I think it's skillful honesty. So what that means is if I want them to receive it in a way that they can grow and go away and action something from it, that means the way I deliver it will be very different from you than it is from the person standing next to you or somewhere else on the team. So that's why I think it's about skillful So how do we build skills in sport? Repetition, mate. So we've got to understand what the skill is, what are the building blocks for the skill, and then we've got to become relentless about practice and then reflection, feedback to ourselves, seeking feedback from others. And I'm talking about feedback as a skill now. If we can build that model that gives us the confidence and it's underpinned by grown people, then I think you shine the value on having feedback as a constant in your environment. And is it achievable in business? I'll walk into rooms with some people and say, yeah, but you've got all day every day in sport to do that. Like, you think we've got all day to just provide feedback? So, and this is a lack of understanding of what the environments actually look like, mate, because there are, mate, there's a million things going on in sport at really, really fast speeds. You've got everything from your coaching team interaction to your interaction with potential owners, boards, the commercial department, your athletes, your medical department. There's all that stuff happening all the time. So you're forced to communicate and feedback more often. The challenge of sport is we don't always do it well either, mate. Sometimes we hide behind that brutal honesty.
When you talk about that, like feedback as a skill, like it's so important. And yeah, I've a number of organizations I've worked in, like big global organizations to mid-size, and like feedback's non-existent. Is it like and it's obviously not going to be like a one size fits all, but is it like an ideal cadence for feedback? Like, to your point, is it becomes just a daily ritual and it's ongoing in different formats? Is there like an ideal model, if that makes sense?
I think what I'll lean back on here is what's right for the individual that you're connecting with.
Yeah.
So what, and I've spoke to you about the 3 C's that we used before. So I would talk about connection, like how connected am I? And all that means is how well do I know them? How do I understand them? What are they like inside of work? What are they like outside of work? What are all those things? What's their upbringing even, mate? If I've got a deeper understanding of where they were born, how they were brought up, what was important to them as a family, all that background, that connection stuff allows me to develop the skill to pitch things in a place that lands for them, not for me. And that's coming back and underpinning it to that sort of growth piece is if it's about helping them grow, then it's about me getting to their level. And that's one of the best bits of advice that I was ever given by Andy Friend was it's our responsibility and our job as coaches to get to the athlete's level and connect with them there rather than us always expecting them to get to our level. So as a driver,
sorry, John, there's something so powerful in that, and that's something you don't see in most workplaces, right? In most cultures is, there's the expectation of the employee needing to get to the employers or the leaders level and not the reverse. I think that's super powerful. The other thing we discussed, and I want to touch on it, is along with feedback, like, post feedback is self-reflection, and the importance of self-reflection. It's probably something, after we spoke about it, like we all probably need to improve on. I certainly need to improve on. But you shared in our conversation, mate, a brilliant story about a sales team. I think in the US, and some of the benefits and the impact that positive, well, not positive, but self-reflection had on a daily basis, right?
Yeah. I think it's one of the most powerful performance tools out there, and it's so simple. It's so simple, mate. It's building a model where you ask yourself, what did I do? How did I do it? What was the outcome? What went well and what might have changed the next time? Like, if you think about that, like, I can do that in 10 minutes in my car at the end of each day. I can capture it now using AI and come back in the next day and go, right, what did I say yesterday? What am I looking for there? So that story that you're speaking about, there's a business in the US, sales team, 200 people. And we worked with a business that wanted to put a compulsory for the sales team, compulsory 15-minute reflection at the end of each day. So we educated them on what the structure for that would be, but we got a huge pushback. And as simple as, most of them are saying that's going to take selling time away from us. And there's some data. I need to double check. There's some historical data that only about 60% of people in the US ever hit target. So if you think about that, it probably fluctuates one way or the other. It's a pretty scary number though. If you think about how sales drives that country particularly. So we we got massive pushback. So we opened it up for volunteers. We politely and kindly let them volunteer, and we got a cohort of, just above 10% came back and said, yeah, we'll do it. So they did it for 3 months, mate, and they got like the direct impacts for them with across that cohort, a 30% uplift in sales over that period.
That's incredible, isn't it? 30% uplift in sales just by having a period of self-reflection every day.
That's the only thing they changed
so
in the
done.
days, mate. The only thing they changed in the days at that point in time as well, because we wanted to get onto a snapshot. If they start adding a whole load of different things in that they're trying as well, whether that's tech or it starts to skew that number and make it look a bit blurry. But so they committed, mate, and they got a 30% uplift. And it was, we at that stage, we know that it'll have an impact, but that kind of impact in an organization is enormous. So that's the power of it. That's the power of it.
Well, there you go. If you're not self-reflecting, that is the power of self-reflecting, and it's something to start doing. And like you said, man, nowadays with AI, you can have a chat on your phone to chat GPT, can't you? And just self-reflect, let it listen, and then ask it to pump out, the bullet points in the morning, right? What are my takeaways from a self-reflection session that I should focus on and put in place today? I think that's such a great little such an easy thing that everyone can do. Like I'm going to take away from today. I'm going to start doing it definitely, because I think it's that easy.
It's an interesting point now, Dan, because we do some work with NAB Bank here in Adelaide, and it's different cohorts, but led by the same ladies. So we always walk in and say, when we use the words high performance, how does it make you feel? And a lot of them it's scary. It sounds complex, and so we then peel it back and they're like, oh, you're talking about revolutionizing the world. I'm going to have to change everything. And we're like, pump the brakes, right? Because number one, high performance is about making a complex simple. It's about how do we make it so that it can be integrated and work for you, not change everything. So it's then, right, well, how do I integrate a 10-minute reflection piece in my day? Everyone's got 10 minutes. Everyone's got 10 minutes where they can sit down and go, right, how did I go? And for your listeners, AI, if you don't have a model or you don't understand the feedback model at the moment, pick up ChatGPT and say to ChatGPT, give me a 3-stage individual self-reflection process that I can do in 6 minutes every day. And you'll get a model to play around with.
Yeah, when I spoke to you, and I speak to you again now about it, it's just an absolute like no-brainer. And the fact that you're saying like it can, it's increased results by some people in sales, but by 30%, you're like, why is everyone not doing this? It's like a little secret sauce here, right? Mate, before we sort of, I guess, we'll leave a changing room behind us, for want of a better word. There's something pretty powerful we spoke about, and it was during your playing days at our old club, Watsonians, and you sort of said to me, look, I wasn't necessarily, I'd say you, I was a great player, only joking.
Yeah.
You sort of said, you weren't necessarily like the most talented or the most gifted player, but the coach wanted you in the changing room, right? Because of your voice, and because in many ways, let's say like not for talent, but for glue, right? You're the glue that held that team together, and an important voice for the coach. How does that concept of I guess being in the changing room, not for talent, but for the glue, how does that map into to a culture carrier in business, right? And I'll get you have conversations with people all the time about business culture, right? The importance of having a culture carrier in an organization versus, the best player on the pitch who's got no idea about culture and doesn't care, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think your description there of glue is probably the best way to put it, because I think we've all, business and sport, we've all played in teams where you have the outstanding performer, you have that extreme talent, and sometimes you come across that extreme talent who has a work rate, and sometimes they don't. But you also see these people in the changing room that, they are not necessarily the flashiest, they're not necessarily the greatest, but they've got a work ethic about them, they've got an intent about them, but they've also got a consistency about them as well. I think so. A really important part to sort of underline. I think on that glue piece, I actually, and what I've learned through performance chain is there's ways for us to identify fit within our teams before we add people to our teams. And there's ways for us to assess our teams and look at what is missing from a fit perspective. And when I come back to it's interesting to me because I get conflicted with this word culture, right? Because it's used so often.
So overused, isn't it? It's overused, isn't it?
It is, and I had a great chat. I've got there's a guy in Queensland called Steve Anderson who he wrote a book recently, and he is high performance of the high performance from setting up the Melbourne Storm all the way through to he was involved in Scotland in the early 2000s. So he helped set the Irish system up. He's a phenomenal guy in terms of his knowledge around high performance systems. And we had a discussion 2 nights ago about culture. And I'm moving to a place where, yes, it's overused. So use the word less, but let's define clearly what culture is, and then understand that, and I will use the sporting example here. If you think about culture in a sport environment, if you've got a club that wants to build a culture off the back of history and been this in the past and the traditions of that and everything, we have to be really aware that we have a really transient playing group in sport right now. So how do you connect them to it? Can you even connect them to it? So should you, and I'll be really blunt here, should we waste time even trying? Or should we get to know them and understand them, what they care about, and build a behavior model that works for the success of the team, but can also complement the club? And I'm not saying we disrespect the club in any way, shape or form, but I think we've got to understand that sometimes when we're trying to build cultures in our organizations that, it could potentially be exceptionally difficult to connect some of your people in your organization to the organizational culture because they don't necessarily care about it.
Well, I was going to say that's a really interesting point to make there about like the transient nature of like sports teams, right? Because careers run, transfer windows, but actually, when you look back to organizations and business, right? Gone are the days of someone being in an organization for 40 years and getting a watch at the end of it, right? Gone are the days of people being in an organization for 10 years, right? Most tenures now, 5 years, 7 years, but actually probably like 3 to 4 would be a good tenure now in a role. And, most CEOs, sweeping statement, perhaps, are generally like 5 years, right? Five or so years in a row. Similar to a head coach, right? So then we raise an interesting point then. Do you even try and develop this culture that's going to be changing every few years anyway, if the leadership changes or dynamics change? Or I guess I'm going to put a big question for you here, but if you're not developing a culture, what do you do instead? Do you develop behaviors or a set of behaviors, a set of performance drivers or a level that everyone's trying to aspire to and get to, rather than this is our culture, which we'll never probably really achieve?
Yes. I think what I've learned over time, the culture is behaviors, Dan, and I think that's how we simplify it. And look again, organizational culture. I still think business can create its overarching identity. This is the way we want to be. This is how we want to be perceived in the market. These are the things that we do at that, boardroom level, C-suite level that move us towards that. I think what I've learned over time is that regardless of what that is, you'll get subculture developing across the organization. So the culture will become whatever the people want it to be. So if we think about that, the culture will become whatever the people want it to be. As a leader, I go, how do I influence that? What do I have to do to influence that? So how connected do I have to be with them to understand that, influence it, but not push it over their throat? Because then what you do is, if you can get that right and connect some of that back to the organizational identity, and that's back to that deep understanding of the individuals that allows you to do that. But if you can get that, then I think you can create skin in your game where you've got difference and be accepting of difference as well.
Do you think there's an element, and again, thinking back to sport, right? If you go into like an elite sport environment or any sort of decent sport environment, there's always that, as a playing group, you always have that pre-season, you have that session, don't you? Like, we're going to set our standards for the year, and I'll try not to use the word culture, but our behaviors, our expectations in the group, right? And actually, that's easy to get around, right? Because you agree it together, and it's very easily then communicated, right? You put it on a poster in a changing room, or wherever it is, or in a WhatsApp group, and everyone's got these rules, right? And it's simple things, right? Never be late for a meeting, turn up, switch on for sessions, about respect, about the way you behave, looking out for each other. Our organizations, therefore, then guilty of missing that step, right? There's leadership groups say, like, what's the culture of organization? Well, we want to be open and transparent and empower our people, and they just go and communicate that, but actually they don't get together for an organization like, this is what we want to achieve, but actually these are the behaviors of the expectations that we need to live and breathe as a group on a daily basis to achieve the culture we're trying to get to. Like, our organization is just trying to jump to the culture without going through that really important step in between.
Well, I think an organization has to have a clear identity. Like, there needs to be, good leaders create this really sort of clear vision.
Many don't know.
Yeah, well, and again, you're absolutely right. Sometimes it's organizational. Sometimes it's an individual CEO at a moment in time. Sometimes it sits at a level below that as well. I think, your question's making me think about things like coming back to the people and where they are. Is if I'm sitting as a CEO of an organization who has 5,000 people in the organization, I'm asking myself, how do I make this place mean something to these people? Because what we do is we're living now in a time where engagement scores are, like, across the country, they're below 30%, right? So, I could get in a debate all day about the process of capturing those scores, right? Because there's a whole lot of inconsistency that picks up things like subjectivity. You ask someone the questions when they've just been in the middle of a road rage on the way into work in the morning, you're not getting a positive answer, mate. You're not getting a positive answer.
Yeah.
So it can be skewed, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
And the big one is anonymous, actually anonymous.
Yeah, and that's almost everywhere we go, and we put diagnostics out, and people come back and say, can we be anonymous here? And like, yeah, you can, but understand the impact. If you're not anonymous and you feel safe enough to put your name against it, then tells us a little bit about the organization's openness to change, or the fear of putting my head above the parapet and getting shot. It's it's pretty crazy stuff. But I'll go back to the engagement score. So let's use them as a guide rather than a measure. So let's say they are at 30%, and we want to try and get them to above 50%. I think what we need to look at is the impact of productivity at that moment in time. And that's probably a number that I'm more interested in than the engagement side of things, is more around productivity. So how do we, again, there's a whole lot of science that tells us if you can generate a sense of belonging in your organization, people will stick around for longer. And you know better than I do in the recruitment space, the cost of good people leaving. I think the recent numbers that we got were, if you're a white collar, mid to senior leader, it could be anything from 750K up, cost of business to replace you. So it's scary numbers. It's scary numbers. So I think back to your question is, how do we create somewhere like people feel like they want to contribute? And if I'm a leader, I would be laser focused on that in business right now. How do my people feel when they walk through the door? Considering that when they walk out the door at home and there's a whole load of stuff happening there, it's impossible to switch that off. But how can we make this a place that when they walk through the door, they feel connected, supported, encouraged, challenged, stretched?
How many? I wonder, and you'll have a better idea about the people you speak to. But how many leaders do you come across who are actually generally laser focused on that? Because, like you said, if you are laser focused on that, you're going to retain your people, right? You've got a healthier, happier, more engaged environment and therefore workforce. Like your productivity we touched on, you've got a more productive workforce. So you're actually building a better business, right? A more resilient business, a more profitable business. But in the world you live in and what you see, how many leaders do you actually find who are truly laser focused on that? I'm going to take a stab in the dark and guess not many, because they're getting, and probably because they're getting pulled in so many different directions, right? And this is probably the one area that maybe gets least attention at times.
Yeah, I think it comes back to priority and intention. I think, you know, I don't think I could put a number on how many I see that do and how many that I don't. I think I see bits and pieces of both sides in most, if that makes sense. I definitely, in the last 3 months, the businesses we've been working with, the leaders that we are working with, and again, this could be Steve Dara, because we actively seek out businesses to work with that care about this space, obviously. The other thing that I would say that your question sort of pushing me is, what we see in businesses is we see social culture and we see performance culture, and not quite often they'll lean one way. So they don't recognize the requirement for both. And when I say, again, I'm using that culture, but the social side is, you know, how they have after work drinks, they display that they care about each other, they celebrate each other. You know, they 30% of the workforce goes and gets lunch together on a Thursday. That's the social side that I speak about, which I actually think is a really, really important part of the connection to be able to drive performance effectively. But when you have that, there's some blind spots and there's some dangers in there that it becomes so comfortable that people don't challenge each other, or they don't have difficult conversations that ultimately support things like creative problem solving, diversity of thought and thinking, deeper levels of strategic thinking. So you end up in this social place where everyone's running around high-fiving each other, patting each other on the back and having all the great conversations, but everyone avoids the difficult stuff. And Grant Dury terms this as, you then drift to failure because it feels good. And you're like, oh yeah, I love going there because like I'm actually genuinely really good mates with the people that I work with. But the blind spot is in that performance space is, right, how are we building trust? And I touched on it before, the erosion and the build of. How are we challenging each other? How are we skillfully having the tough conversations when they need to be had? Are we skillfully challenging thoughts and ideas around the way we're doing things and who's doing them? And then again, when you look at it, like, are we genuinely aligned behind where we want this business to be? And that's what I would say sits in that performance side. What we've learned is that I think the two need to cross over. And there's a space in the middle now that we're looking at and going, right, if we bring the best of both in, can we help business create their high performance model that respects the social side and how important it is, but also elevates and highlights how important it is to have these performance behaviors in your environment as well, if you want to be successful?
There's a lot in that, and I want to. Do you know what? We're going to touch on AI in this episode, but I think we're not. I think we're going to come back for an episode 2, right? Because this is straddling quite nicely into how we bring people into an organization, right, in the right seat and the right chair. But there's something a bit deeper I want to touch on, and again, we spoke about it earlier in the week, and going back to that social side, and the high fives and the celebration, right, and doing all the positive stuff. But you actually told me, you raised an example of actually a really positive, really interesting, powerful story about, if you put people in the wrong situations, right? And there was one about, like someone did really well, but the productivity dropped off as a result of a celebration, right? And I think before we get into talking about how you get the right people into an organization, that little story, I hope you're happy to share now, is probably going to paint the picture, set the scene for this really nicely.
Yeah. So again, this is what we term KYP, know your people. So like celebration, we know is fundamental and foundational for layering in more success. So, and it's as simple as, if I recognize the good work that you've done and I acknowledge the good work that you've done, then there's a greater chance of you seeking the opportunity to do more good work. we're really simple in terms of that. And I learned a lot of this through working with people like Dara, Wendy, and Emily Elrods in the US. I've just opened, I've always had this curiosity around it, but they've opened a level of understanding around the physical, emotional, but also the chemical side of the brain and what it does. So I think we know that celebration is really, really important. What we've got to be careful with, again, the blind spot is if we over celebrate, but we don't acknowledge the moments that need to be addressed, and we would call them learner moments or teaching moments. If we don't address them, then you get this false sense of success where, you get your moments of success and celebration, but you're actually missing the opportunity to grow from the learning. Where it becomes nuanced and quite intricate is when we get to that individual level around KYP. And back to Andy Friend's point about you got to get to their level. And quite simply, again, and there's tools that tell us this, there are people, and I'll use it, probably the most rudimentary way I can put it is extroverts and introverts. So if you're an introvert, and our celebration is a one-size-fits-all at the end of the month where you put on stage, they play your gym music and, everyone's popping champagne corks and party poppers. And if you're an introvert, how's that actually making you feel?
Your worst nightmare, isn't it?
It's your worst nightmare. So at that point in time, I haven't performance enabled, I've performance constricted. I guarantee that person never wants to be in that situation again. Therefore, what happens to the quality of the work or the productivity levels? They go to that comfort zone. They go, well, I'm just going to do enough because I never want to be put on that stage again and celebrated like that because it makes me feel embarrassed and awkward and everything like that. So I think we've got to, as leaders in our teams, look at what our people really need from us, understanding the power of celebration and having clear moments of learning and growth and all that kind of stuff. But it has to be about the individual. And there's people that want to be put on stage, and there's people that they just want a handshake. Well done. Sometimes they say, I saw you did this week. I loved it. Well done. And that can happen. Yeah, it can happen walking to the bathroom, mate, for some people. And they grow 6 feet from that.
There's a term in there, which I want to dive into quickly, performance restriction. And in all honesty, I've attempted to manage teams, right, and grow teams in the past, and you get too early for it. So I'm not a great manager of people. I can say that I think I'm a good motivator of people, and people will follow me into battle, I believe. But I'm not a great manager of people, right? I've kind of accepted that. I'd love to be better. I'll always continue to work on it, but there's people far better than me, and actually. Yeah. Now I'm sitting here reflecting a bit deep and thinking, actually, Jesus, I was probably a really guilty of performance restriction versus performance enhancing. And that, don't get me wrong, the performance restriction, the intent would have come from a good place. Uh-huh. But I can see actually that why the approach might have restricted performance. So I guess where I'm going in this is how can leaders, managers avoid performance restriction? And that's a massive question. But does it really come down to that KYP piece? Or does it come down to actually more self-awareness of what you're doing in your own approach, or maybe a combination of both?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a combination of both. I think that KYP, the connection piece, is just fundamentally important. I'll give you a quick story. When I went into Los Angeles last year, I made day one with some athletes was, how do you want to be coached? The first question I'm asking them, like they're expecting me to start push technical, tactical, my thoughts and ideas, philosophies, and again. And I'm sorry, how do you want to be coached? And they're looking at me going, what? Yeah. I was like, how do you want to be coached? Tell me about you. Tell me about your background. What brings you here? How do you ended up here? And they're like, are we going to talk about rugby? I was like, we are talking about rugby. I want to know how you want to be led so that I can help you improve and grow. So that first end piece, I think, is as leaders, learning to, I think the self-reflection piece is used. You touched on something there, like you could turn my attention versus it back. So I haven't met too many I haven't met too many leaders who their intentions are like real negative. I haven't met
Mm.
too many. I'm walking in here to cause trouble. I haven't seen too many around that, and by that I mean like causing trouble can sometimes just be, I'm going my way. I'm doing this my way. I don't care what you say. I'm doing it my way. That's cool, and sometimes that can be packaged up as leadership. But the impact piece is like, what level are people then executing at?
Yeah.
So I think that intention impact, if we can build that into our reflection models, are right, hang on, what's my intention here? What's the impact likely to be? That almost pre-mortem. Like, if I do this, how's it going to land?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to throw a scenario at you, right? Probably put you on the spot. So I love the piece when, like, you mentioned there in the States and saying to the athletes, right, well, how do you want to be coached? Like, you tell me how you want to be coached. But I think there's a bit of reality in that, is that most people in high performance sports want to be coached, right? Because they want to get better, but they're like, I go and, if I go and take up a new sport, right, or go to the gym, whatever, people always say, "Oh, like, you're pretty coachable." I'm like, yeah, because I played sport. I enjoy being coached. I see the value in being
Yeah.
coached. I see the value in better, right? And you can have a leader, right, with all the great intentions, sits the person down. How do you want to be managed, right? And the response you're probably going to get in the workspace is like, "Oh, wait, I want really hands off. Just leave me to do my job, and I want autonomy, and I'll perform better that way." But you're sitting there being like, "That's great, but actually, like, I've kind of identified some gaps in your ability, your performance that we need to improve." So how do you straddle that? How do you take on that scenario where you're like, "Cool, I'm doing the right thing here. I'm really practicing KYP. I'm understanding my individual. I'm given the opportunity to voice how they want to be coached or managed in this case. Or actually, let's call it coaching, because it should be coaching in the workplace too." And their sort of approach is, "Nah, hands off, don't need it." And you're like, "Oh, actually, you do need quite a bit." Like, how do you deal with that situation?
Yeah, it's probably because that's ultimately feedback, isn't it? It's feedback that rolls into
Yeah.
a tough conversation. I think I'm sitting with them. I've got a whole load of evidence. Like, if they're saying to me, "I also want autonomy. I want complete autonomy," and I would be like, "Right, well, here's where we actually are right now for the current reality. Here's the evidence. Here's what we need to do to be able to get you to that place." So I'm putting it back on them. It's like, here's what, and I'm using the language we. Here's what we need to do. But that is putting it back on them around, right, you're saying that's what you want. There's some things we've got to do to get you there. And quite often, I go back to basic humans, and I'm an optimist, mate, right? But and I'll always find the conversation with this because I'm an optimist. But I come back to that. How do you want to be coached? Well, right, I want autonomy. You're looking at, right, this is where it is right now. And I think that's where that skillful honesty kicks in.
Yeah.
It's like, listen, I understand if we want to get there. And that's, mate, again, I'm throwing a whole lot of stuff at you here, but like the concepts, I gave this to these guys on Monday, the like, agree, and understand as a leader is we don't need people to always like and agree with us as leaders. And we actually, if that's what we're seeking, we're setting ourselves up for failure. So if that's the case, then it's my job. If you're saying you want autonomy and I can't give you it right now, but my job is to help you grow, I go straight to that analytical side. What do I need to do to help them get there?
Mm.
Right. So they tell me that's what they want. My job is to help them get there. They might get there, they might never get there. And we've all worked with people that just don't do the work to get there. And that's cool. We're just giving ourselves levers to pull as we're going through that process. But I think, falling back on that understanding. So I might sit and say, I can't give you that autonomy right now. Here's why. And it's not subjective, it's objective. Here's why. But I'm going to help you get there.
And therein lies great leaders, right? Like, great leaders who talk about empowering people or they want to allow people to get better. They want to empower them to grow. They want to support their growth versus managers who just want to manage, right? And yeah, there's so much to, and I could sit here and talk for hours on this, right? But there's so much to unpack for that. Just to add to that, and there's another little sort of, I guess, piece, and I kind of touched before. Like, I feel like people in sporting environments, and we discussed the other day, are probably more open or more akin to receiving feedback, right? Because they get it so often. If you go into any large organization, most people are like, yeah, like I'm happy to take feedback. Like, give me feedback. I'm good at it. But reality is very dreadful at taking feedback. They find it really difficult, and they actually, you give people feedback, and you see them like they're sort of the bats getting up, and they're taking it as a criticism, right? As an individual, so if you're an individual in an organization, you're probably like ready, wanting to take that next step to become a leader or grow in the organization, and you know you've got to plug in some gaps and develop some skills.
Yeah.
Any sort of tools people like potentially can take on in terms of being better or more open at receiving feedback? Is it purely a self-reflection piece, or is there mechanisms or strategies that people can use to be, I guess, better at receiving and using feedback, not just receiving it, but using it?
Yeah, I think we were sort of bridging into that accountability space as well, mate. And look, quite often people get a cold shower when you use the words feedback and difficult conversations and accountability. And like the reality is, mate, that those behaviours are absolutely necessary to achieve any kind of performance that's above mediocre. So then what does it look like for the individual? You know, it's a big question, because who triggers the feedback? You know, and I would say who triggers it, because then if I want to create an environment of feedback in my organization, how am I clearly putting that message out to the people? And then how am I helping them understand the reason? And then how am I being relentless around the language I use around the reason? So all I'm doing is setting the scene, and I would do this. I did it on Monday morning. The team walk in, I'm going to work with, and it's a Monday morning, it's 7:30 in the morning, mate, and some of them are eyes hanging out their head, some of them are bouncy, ready to go. But so how do I set the scene for the day? Well, I try and create this opportunity to create positive emotion in the room straight away. And it's as simple as, tell me about the best moment you've had in your weekend. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, tell me about the best moment. Oh, you're interested in what we do away from work? Of course I am. So you get that set the scene in a positive sense, I think is, you know, what are the benefits? What's the benefits model of having feedback in your life? So you can clearly articulate that and then make it really simple and clear. That's the piece that we probably see leaders struggle with most, is creating the clarity of the message through feedback. And it's because it's uncomfortable. This same group on Monday are going, right, I'm gonna put the word feedback at the top of the page. You know, the old flip chart. There you go. The word feedback. I want you to walk up, write your name, and tell me the emotion that provokes. And it's a wide open question. So they're starting to think, well, what about giving it? What about receiving it? And everything's leading towards that space where it's uncomfortable, it's scary. But then when you unpack it even further, it's actually part of it that's scary. They actually find receiving it really easy. And they find receiving it really easy because they can control how they respond. So it might be something I completely disagree with. You might come and give me a bit of feedback that I completely disagree with. If there's no deep trust or respect in our relationship, I can just stand and be quiet and nod my head.
Incredible how it all comes back to trust, isn't it? Like you said, you know, add into a conversation or add into a relationship or eroding a relationship. That's it's
the foundation.
Yeah, trust me, it's at the heart of everything, isn't it? Like you say.
Yeah.
But one thing, obviously, I'm obsessed with, and I live and breathe every day is my world of executive search, right? And going out and working with organizations to bring the right people into an organization, right? To put them in the right seat. But really, I've become really more obsessed with making sure that's a success, right? And not a success in that they make it past probation period, right? But success as in like they perform in the role's impactful, and the whole, you know, they bring an impact to an organization. Now, well, one thing that's probably not discussed, right, is bringing a leader or anyone into an organization can be a hugely positive, beneficial, impactful growth moment. But equally, it can also be the most destructive thing you can do, right? And you see it in sport, right? You go and sign a global superstar, but we don't fit in, and it's like a cancer in a team, right? It can rip through a team, can rip it apart. And very similar, and it's probably less discussed sometimes or spoken about. You bring the wrong person to an organization, particularly sometimes a smaller organization where you can't hide. It can destroy a place really, really quickly. And we spoke before about behavior traits and developing a culture, and that could take years and years and years. And what one person can come in and do it like within a 6-month period, if not quicker. So, and I'm really moving towards and something we've been speaking about, and I want to get your thoughts on how we do it. Is right. It's great. You go and I speak to clients about well, we want to go and hire X, Y, and Z, and here's a job description, and go ahead and do it, and we've all agreed on the budget. And I actually say to them, well, listen, are we definitely aligned here? Yep, 100%. Okay, well, I'm going to ask, person A here and person B who's also involved in this process, what's your expectations of this person coming in, within the first 3 months? And you get two entirely different answers, right? And actually you're like, well, we're not aligned. And if we don't sort of assess this now and get it right, then whoever comes into this is really set up for failure. And the whole thing is going to fall apart pretty quickly. And, often, they'll point the finger at me, right, for bringing the wrong person in, when I'm actually, well, there's actually a few things we need to address internally first. And you see it probably more so, we spoke about too, in like hyper growth environments, right? So we need to get people in, and get people in. We don't really have time, and they burn through people. So I guess, how do you overcome that? And how do we go about, and we've got some ideas, but you'll have more ideas, is actually, how important is it to take the time and actually assess what's there already in terms of personality, character traits, what you're trying to achieve? So actually, the requirement for the person coming in isn't a job description. It's actually a personality type, a character type, and then you're really, truly plugging the right people in together.
That's right.
There's a question in there somewhere, but I probably rambled on.
Yeah, but how do you measure fit? And I think there's two sides to the coin, like we spoke about. I think in business, we're good at getting in touch with guys like you and saying, I need to fill this spot. This is what I'm looking for from a competency perspective. Where I maybe see an opportunity is from a consultative approach, assessing readiness. I'm going to say readiness. I've got things like we're working with a guy in the UK he's built this measurement tool for assessing trust in an organization, and it's qualitative and quantitative. So it's data driven, but it's taking into account the human being and the expectations and wants and needs of that as well. So I think about things like that is how do we partner with organizations to assess where they are right now? So we would call it current reality. So they're telling you they need someone, and this is the role that we need to fill. Cool. If that's the role that you need to fill, that's awesome. How do we help you make sure that you get the right person? How do we and that means that, the organization needs to turn the mirror on itself first and go really clearly, this is who we are. This is what we are. This is where we want to go. These are the gaps. And this is the type of character that's going to blend well with our team. We're looking for someone that is X, Y, and Z. And there's a whole lot of tools out there now that we can use to front end assess fit, so that you've got a greater chance of getting the right person sitting in that right seat. Outside of the competency piece, mate, because we both know the competency. Once you get to a stage where you're down your last three, everyone's got the competency. So well,
to be honest, even at the start, everyone's got, like, if you're at a certain level, you wouldn't be ready to have the competency, right? It's funny, and like I love that the KYP piece, because I'm massive in that. Like, when people give me, we need to hire a role for this organization, I'm like, cool, like, I need to come and hang out with you for a bit. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, I should come and hang out with you. I need to really get to know you as a person, and I want to come and sit and watch you work for a day, and then I want to go out for lunch with you, and I want to, like, and they're like, oh, well, no one's ever really asked this. And I'm like, well, I can't go and get you the right human being unless I really understand you as a human being and what makes you tick and what you like in people. And that's done by observing and spending time with people. And actually, I do little things, right? Like, I'll phone people up after a week just to check in on the process and double check. But these are all little things for me to pick up bits or comments, and I start testing things, right? Oh, like, I've spoken to X, Y, and Z, the market, they've got this approach, and they're like, oh, that's really cool. And you're constantly, the requirements constantly building for your interactions I have with people. But that for me is, I love it. If people don't let me hang out with them, I'm like, I probably can't do this for you, because I need to You need to get under the skin of who you are and under the bonnet of your organization to really be able to deliver a job. And that's what probably frustrates me a lot about the search and the recruitment industry. It's just too focused on transaction, right? It's like, cool, give me a job description and the budget, I'll get you the person. Like, this doesn't work.
Logically, my brain goes to places like, and I love what you're talking about, because like who recruits? Normally, senior leaders make a decision, right? We need to recruit, and then they'll set up the process, whatever it is. Depending on the size of the organization. But and you'll know, I don't know the answer to this, man, so it'll be great to pick your brains. But how many recruitment, trusted recruitment advisors or consultants would go in, embed themselves in the organization for a number of days, speak to the leaders that are looking to fill the role, and then who would go and sit amongst all the other ICs or all the people that sit in the place of the business that this person is going to be transplanted into, and say, hey, what's it really like to work here?
Yeah, not many. That's what I love doing. That's what I try and do, right? I try and I'll get to, if I need to go and spend a day or two in an organization, I'll do it. And people are just like, oh, this is new. I'm like, well, break it down. Like, how do you expect me to put someone into this culture if I can't? Well, there's two things, right? One, if you really want to go and get good people, I have to be able to communicate your organization, have to be able to effectively communicate you as a person or a leadership team, right? And I can only do that by spending time in it and living it and breathing it. Secondly, I can't get the right person unless I truly understand how you guys all interact. And there's no right or wrong. It's just understanding that to be able to manage a process, right? Well, actually, look, this is actually a fairly aggressive organization in terms of growth, and there's not, it's not all love and cuddles in this place, and that can be fine. But as long as you're finding the right person who's going to thrive in that organization, right? But again, you have to go deeper. But the answer to your question is, mate, not really. Like, I think most just go and spend an hour there, take a job brief, shake hands, do the fancy bit, but not the willingness to go and take that extra step. And I think for me, it's going to become more and more important, right? And I sort of did a LinkedIn post today saying, my role as a recruitment now is, or a search professional is really changing, because the reality is AI can do what recruitment can do, right? Traditionally, it was all about, well, you got someone because you wanted access to a specific niche network. Or everyone talks about, I want access to your black book, and then everyone in the market, right? And let's be really clear, mate. Networks are still super, super important, right? And relationships are 100% at the heart of it all. But the reality of what's coming, if it's not already here, is AI is faster and more effective in the black book. It can find people within seconds. It's probably at a stage now, AI, where knows more about the market, can identify trends quicker, and movements in markets, and actually produce reports, more in-depth reports quicker. Yeah. And then the other thing is, now everyone has access to the same tools. So gone are the days when it was the recruitment profession had the sourcing tools and the search tools, right? Everyone, there's hundreds of them out there now. Everyone's got a level playing field. So then actually, what's your value add, right? As a search consultant, as a senior recruiter, the value add is actually understanding how people tick. For me, it's focusing more than ever on the human traits and the individual people, and that's what you said. That's built on trust and knowing your people, and certainly going deeper research. Right, I think there's something massive in that, in really assessing existing leadership teams, their traits, how they operate, their models, and researching that deeper at the front end. Not just basing things off a job search. And I guess the last piece now is, to me, it's really about how you develop a go-to-market strategy, and how do you communicate an organization? How do you communicate the people behind that? Because that's not achievable in a job advert. It's not achievable on a really poorly drafted LinkedIn message or text message. And that's something I take a lot of time in, is I package things up, right? Like, I communicate with people in the organization. I communicate with the organization, and like, shock horror, right? We get really good response rates and we get far higher engagement. So, like the role's changing, and I think the human, the term is human in the loop, right? That human piece and understanding people and building trust and all the things you discussed about creating an incredible environment are actually more and more important in my world, and they've
Yeah.
traditionally probably been the bits that have been overlooked at the front end. It's just been come in, get a job description, fill the job, we'll give you some money, right? And that's those days are dying, I think. And
Totally
if
agree.
you really want to be able to add value to an organization, it's getting that piece done at the start, before the process, before the search even begins, and that's how you have successful outcomes. And then, to your point before, that's how you bring the right people into the organization. I probably always use that old rugby term, like energizers and sappers, right? Bringing in energizers to an organization, not sappers. And
Totally
positive outcomes versus negative outcomes.
Right, you touched it there. Like, I think our clients are on out how you provide value and what's it become we can expect. And I think if we can clearly build process, and what I'm talking about your process, Dan, because I think we've sort of jumped into the AI space here, which I think we should catch up again and go into some depth with. But the limiting factor, or the piece that could top out really quickly, is human capacity in that space. So I think, and it sounds so counterintuitive, because we're talking about something, that technology that helps us move faster than we ever have before, and there is all that fear around replacement and whatever else, and there's definitely some of that coming down. Make no mistakes, that there will be a reshape of the tasks that humans do and the tasks that AI is capable of doing. But I still think fundamentally, as human beings, we want to work with and build trust and connection with other humans. So when you then start looking at what's my value model, and we spoke about this at length the other day, I think the value model being, what am I doing front end? How am I genuinely identifying what you need? And then how am I genuinely making sure and being transparent around how I'm sourcing to meet that need? And then the back end of that, I think, is, there is a challenge dropping new people in a business. Let's say you've got a team of 6 and you're dropping 2 new people, and the entire team will slow down as the 2 try and get up to speed, if they're a genuine team.
And and that's something that's overlooked, right? And I see it all the time. Is, you've got a leadership team of 4 and they've been together for 5 years, and they're like, yeah, we're going to hire someone. I'm like, this is cool, but I'm like, you understand that your 4-year dynamic and your leadership's all changing. It's all going to change overnight.
Right.
And they're like, oh, no, it won't. I'm like, it will. It will change dramatically, and your individual relationships with each other are going to change, because it's like bringing a third person into a marriage, for the want of a better term, right? And preparing leadership teams for that from an early age, and getting that stuff sorted out before it's too late. And that's when I talk about, setting people up for success, or roll up for success, is visiting these things early on in the process, preparing leadership teams for what's going to come, and getting them ready to navigate it. So when that person does come in, it's not a challenge. Like, cool, like, we know what's going to happen. Like, we've got coping mechanisms in place, we've got a strategy, we've got a process, and it's going to be a really good outcome at the end of it.
100%. It's your readiness, mate. It's like and that, like, if you talk about partnerships and long-term relationships with business, like when you're a trusted advisor or a consultant that's like got a deep understanding of them as a client, then you got a much greater chance of getting them on that journey to prepare for readiness, versus this, right, we're growing, can you help replace someone? It's, well, hang on, how do we prepare your team for readiness? How do we then get the identification process right, the onboarding process right? And then how can we impact speed to productivity, because we've got those things right front end? And if you can, again, optimist, but if you can increase speed to productivity because you get that front end stuff right, like you talk about a bit of a game changer in the marketing, I think that's right. You think about businesses that are growing. So, and if you look at it from a graph perspective, sometimes you get plateau. A business will go, they'll grow, you get plateau as they increase resource, and that could be tech resource, that could be human resource. But all of these things, you get plateau, performance plateau, sometimes performance dip while people get up to speed and go. If you can impact the plateau or the dip in a positive sense as an advisor through system, process, and people, then you talk about the trust you build in the organizations you work with. You'll have people knocking your door wanting to work with you rather than you chase your business, I think.
Well, yeah, fingers crossed, right? And I think you're right, mate. But like, I think the last thing, just to wrap up, is something you live by is your three C's, right? Connection, clarity, and consistency, and that's clearly been weaved out. Weaved through everything we've talked about today. But if I was going to shadow you for a week, how do you think I would see the connection, the clarity, and the consistency? Appearing on an hourly sort of daily basis, and yeah, keen to see how that might look like.
Yeah, it's a good question, mate. It's the connection piece. It's just how, where, when, who. If you were to walk in on Monday, I think human connection is so important. So I'm walking in a corporate, man. I'm fist pumping. Like, I've got a financial service firm. They are absolutely brilliant, mate. But they're the teams of accountants, so they're quite conservative. They're quite. So we did a program, or we did some work with them. It's going to continue on, but we did a period over 4 weeks where we did these check-ins. So I'm in on a Thursday checking in with them, and first week they're just sitting stony faced, and I'm like, cool, right, now I've got the benchmark. Next week, I'm like, right, everyone get up. I want you to fist pump and say good morning to everyone. So this is 9:30 in the morning. Some of them will have seen each other, but haven't even said good morning. Morning. So that's what I mean about connection. And that's that part that makes it human, that I think is really, really important. So you'll see that kind of stuff from me straight away, mate. You'll hear many conversations. This is where coaching comes into its own, because what I learned over time was the power of great questions. So that's where the connection, if you want people to feel engaged in a conversation with you, ask them about themselves. Straight out of the gate, ask them, how's your day going? What would it? Alice Ferguson will tell you this, when he used to walk through the gates of their training ground, and like the first thing he's doing is asking the ladies at reception, how's your day? Or how are the grandkids? Or that's connection. Or sometimes it's like, hey, I can see you struggling a bit, and you need help. You get so much from body language as the verbal language that, again, that connection piece is underpinned by, well, it's really intentional, it's really purposeful, because I see the benefits in terms of how it makes people feel, but also in terms of the performance side of things.
What about that clarity piece? Because that's such an important one, right? And I think, we spoke about before, right? A lot of leaders struggle with clarity in communication.
Yeah. It's interesting. The thing I've become most comfortable with, it helps with this, is I'm really comfortable with silence. I'm really, really comfortable with silence. And the older I get, the more comfortable I've become with that. So I don't feel the need, when I ask questions or deliver a message that needs to be clear and concise, I don't feel the need to surround it with bullshit. I don't feel the need to put a whole lot of other words around it. I'll just say it, or I'll ask it, and I'm quite happy to sit and wait and let people process. And then, so that's part of that clarity piece, is, saying less, but being really accurate around what you do say and how you say it. The other piece is, what do people need from you? So from a leadership perspective, quite often you'll get teams of people that think they want and need everything. The leader's job is to understand, how do I create clarity? I can't give them everything, but how do I create clarity around the things that I can give them, and use that to motivate them? So I think it's different every team, but you'll see me talking less than I would have when I was 25. You see me asking more questions, again, that are helping create clarity, that are also helping people empower them to get on and do what they do. I will be really clear around when I'm available, when I'm not available. You talk about availability, that impacts connection. How many businesses have you walked into where you'll hear leaders say, I've got an open door policy, and they come in the morning, they walk straight through their office and they close the door? And it's like, hey, actions and words have to align, because people are looking for that the whole time.
That's
so
true,
again, that's that creating clarity piece, is like, right, actions and words have to align. That's the start point for that.
Man, obviously consistency is probably the boring one, but the most important one, and speaks for itself, right?
Yeah, you nailed it, mate. The boring one. People change when they get bored. How often? And I'll go back to, I don't know, somewhere between 2000 and 2010, and you're winning a game, you're 35 points to 5 up, and you change what you did. because you get bored and suddenly you find yourself 35, 32 and you're going, shit, what happened here? It's because you got bored of being consistent.
So true. It's a real good example as well, isn't it?
Consistency takes discipline, man. Takes discipline. Yeah. Stick with it.
Discipline's hard work, right? Which is why it slips off. Mate, this has been awesome. Mate, it was more unpacked, so there's definitely going to be an episode 2, because I think like we've only skimmed the surface on so many important topics here. But mate, in the meantime, where can people find you? Where can they find the performance chain? If there's anything that resonated, how can people get hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, if LinkedIn's probably the best place. Just search Neil Tunnah. Surname obviously Tunnah. The other one is the websites there, theperformancechain.com. I am nowhere near as good on Instagram and TikTok and all these things that every social media expert, that consultant that we've ever spoken to tells me I should be. But the best place is obviously the website and LinkedIn, mate. I'm pretty... Well, I wouldn't say I'm active enough. I'm certainly not as good at the activity with the videos and stuff as you are, but I'm trying to be better at it. So if anyone wants to reach out through there, mate. And the other thing, once I make a connection, if someone's interested in a chat or there's a bit of value, I'm more than happy sharing email addresses and phone numbers and WhatsApps and stuff like that once that connection's made.
Legend, mate. Cheers, Tunnah. Thanks, brother. Speak soon.
Appreciate it, mate. Awesome stuff. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for listening, and hope you enjoyed that episode of Future People. I've been your host, Daniel Moussa, and this has been brought to you by Thirdway Advisory. Please make sure you like, follow, share and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and I look forward to seeing you next week for another intellectual and engaging conversation.